I've always had to prove myself to be twice as good.
Stop counting on other people. Stop blaming us. I'm sick of the blame game.
I think it's all race baiting myself.
But we have to face the reality that there is a white power structure that has benefited from these privileges.
White privilege has been described as an invisible package of unearned assets, giving white people in America an advantage in everyday life. But as you just heard, opinions about if it still exists could not be more different.
And the simple act of not being able to sit at a segregated lunch counter.
As we walk through a photo gallery portraying Arkansas's racial past, Professor John Kirk told us white privilege is the result of historic inequalities still shaping society today.
You have access to better schools, better healthcare, and a whole range of other resources simply on the basis of your birth.
Kirk is director of the Institute on Race and Ethnicity at UALR.
White families belong to a group of people who've been able to enjoy the fruits of their labor, they've been able to earn money, they've been able to accumulate wealth.
A recent survey published by the Arkansas Urban League found that in 2013, average income for whites across 5 cities in the state were more than double that of blacks.
If you look at what I make as far as reimbursement of my white counterparts, significantly different.
Dr. Anika Whitfield is a Little Rock podiatrist. During her career, she says she's dealt with the pain of a system favoring whites.
I was asked as I was sitting down to take my exam for the state board whether or not I really wanted to practice here.
Retired pastor Charles Williams sees it differently. He grew up in segregated Mississippi.
It was the early 60s. It was the Jim Crow time. The time when I used to ask my mom, why can't I go and drink from that fountain?
But he says since then, the country has changed.
That was a time when our community was, the lines were drawn. That has since been dispelled.
Today, he says white privilege is a term used to divide.
I'm tired of people that won't even try to resolve us killing each other. And they want to blame the white man for what happened in the inner city. And it's wrong.
It's more structural and institutionalized.
But Kirk says the evidence of white privilege is in the numbers. Take a look at education. Only 7% of black 10th graders in Arkansas are proficient in math. White numbers are triple that. In reading, writing, science, and English, white students also outperform their black counterparts.
Most white folks aren't even aware of it. Most white folks would actually deny it. But it's a circle of privileges in which poor and middle class and wealthy white folks get advantages that most African Americans don't.
Jim Ross is a former member of the Little Rock School Board who says his best friend from grade school taught him about the impact of white privilege.
His father had been a sharecropper, my father had been a sharecropper. My father went off, joined the military, his father went off and joined the military. When they both came back to Little Rock, my father, with a 12th grade education, became a vice president at Worthen Bank. His father became a janitor at one of our local schools.
For me, it's never given me anything.
Kelly Cooper grew up in a middle-class home, went to college, but now lives on the streets. He blames poor decisions, but says being white never helped.
I think pretty much it's going to be whatever you make it. In the United States of America, you know, you can make it or you can fall on your face like I have.
This is the divide we heard as we spoke with people across central Arkansas. Some talk about the need for profound change. Others dispute the significance of white privilege.
A prominent civil rights attorney and state legislator, 79-year-old John Walker, was arrested for obstructing governmental operations this morning.
Conservative talk show host Doc Washburn hears it all on his afternoon program.
As far as the white privilege goes, I'm half black and half white. My dad's white, my mama's black. I don't believe there's a such thing. We've got to stop blaming other people and start taking responsibility for our own actions.
Many of his listeners would scoff at the notion of white privilege, but Washburn says he learned a lesson listening to Tim Scott.
In the course of 1 year, I've been stopped 7 times.
He's a black Republican U.S. Senator from South Carolina who testified passionately on the Senate floor about being repeatedly pulled over and harassed by police, even though he's a high-ranking elected official.
I have felt the anger, the frustration, the sadness, and the humiliation that comes with feeling like you're being targeted for nothing more than being just yourself.
So if he's talking about it, I'm like, okay, well, then that sounds like a real thing.
Do you feel it's worth it going through this? Yes, I do.
60 years after racial strife focused the eyes of the world on Central Arkansas, much change has come. But in some ways, we remain a divided society in where we live, go to school, and where we worship. Whatever you think about the idea of white privilege, those truths remain. The definition of progress depends on the individual, so it's up to each of us to work for changes to make our community a better place. In Little Rock, I'm Drew Petromo.